Yeah, awesome, awesome. Oh, look at those locations come flying through. That's great. That's great. So many, so appreciative folks of you all tuning in. One of the things that we've been able to do here at COVID is to make these lectures and these conversations more available to people because of the virtual environment. So that's been really great. Thank you all so much. Tonight, as usual, I've got my colleague Paul Bloom, who's running the back of the house. He's running the production. Thank you so much. Paul's might chime in at some moment to interrupt me if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris speak, which they had said they were going to do tonight. They said this earlier in the day, but that was contingent upon a kind of declaration of victory from some of the networks, and that hasn't come yet. It's coming, but it hasn't come yet. So don't think they're going to speak during this time slot, but if they do, we'll pause to watch them. Thank you all so much. Welcome tonight to the 2020 election. What happened and where do we go from here? This is going to be a part lecture. I have a couple slides I put together, but it's not going to be anything near as extensive as you might be used to from my lectures, because I just have so much work going on still in these states and with folks that I was able to give this some time and attention. And I know the main points I want to make, but I just couldn't pull together a ton of PowerPoint for it. It's going to be part of that. It's going to be partly that tonight. And then it's also going to be partly featuring a colleague of mine from Common Power, Charles Douglas. Charles has been talking about a set of ideas he has about how we go forward from here. And I really wanted those to be brought forward tonight. I think they're really, really insightful. And so Charles is going to bring those in. And then together, he and I are going to do some Q&A with all of you. And we're going to do Q&A for a while. All right, so that's the plan here. It's about 5:10 right now p.m. Pacific time. Maybe we'll plan for 6:30-ish stop, or 9:30 if you're in Portland, Maine, for example. So really just glad and appreciative of all of you for your engagement. Well, it's been a heck of a 4 years, right? And we might be on the verge of ending one portion of this. No, wait a second. We are on the verge of ending one portion of this really difficult 4-year period. But the things that come with Donald Trump as president, are still here for us to deal with. And so that's going to be the kind of one of the themes in my talk here. And I want to talk about how we deal with it. So I wanted to identify what I'm going to call 5 patterns that are important in this election that we see in the data, in the voting. Okay, 5 patterns of how people acted and what it means and how we can interpret this election. I want to hit these 5. I want to give them, and hopefully I'll be able to hit this mark, but no more than 15 minutes total for all 5. Okay. I want to kind of go through them, and we're welcome to come back to them in the Q&A later if you want. But I want to go through these because my goal in this evening is not to give a deep dive. I can't deliver that tonight, but to give a 5,000 foot level analysis of where we're at and how we got here. That's slide 1, is the 5 patterns. Slide 2 is the one defining element of this election that I think is a profoundly meaningful marker for where we're going. So 5 things that are important, and then 1 uber defining component. Okay, first of the 5 patterns is we have turnout at historic numbers in this election. The level of turnout for voters is unprecedented in American history. We've never had so many voters because we haven't had as big a population, and we haven't had as big a population subgroups, as we haven't had as widespread of voting opportunities as we have today. So we had the turnout in historic numbers in this election. We're gonna probably hit about 160 million nationally, which is up from about 130 million in 2016. So you're talking, 30 million increase, which is, just about a fourth, which is really remarkable in that period, in over 4 years. We're going to hit 67% of registered voters voting. That's where the projections are at right now. And that will be the highest turnout among registered voters. And registered voters is always culturally defined based upon the time of who could vote when. But 67% of registered voters will be the high in this country since 1900, the year 1900. So we're at really astronomical turnout. This is incredible. This is a win. I believe that the more people vote, that's better for our democracy. And if the folks that I'm supporting lose in the midst of high turnout, that I just have to accept that's an outcome that I accept as part of the process of building a more just and inclusive democracy. And we've seen this turnout in so many states: Montana, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, where we have all-time turnout records in these states. That's awesome. That is really awesome. And that needs to become a new norm for us. That is something we need to continue. A second pattern here is an alignment for the states of their presidential and their Senate votes. Now, if you joined me for some of the lectures that I gave in September and in October, I did talk about this as part of my Senate discussion about the alignment between the likelihood of states voting for senators and presidents of the same party. And in 2016, we had the very first 100% alignment where no state voted for the president of the presidential candidate of one party and then selected a senator from a different party. That didn't happen at all in 2016. Everybody aligned. And we continue to have very, and that was the first time that ever happened. We continue to have very, very high alignment during presidential election years of how a state votes at the presidential level and how a state votes at the Senate level. So here are the Senate outcomes as they stand today from this election. We have state decisions, we have outcomes in most of the states. So we have Democratic victories, we have Republican victories, and then there's two grayed out ones over here in North Carolina and there's three grayed out ones. There's North Carolina, there's Georgia, and then there's Alaska. And there's a second Georgia election too. So there's 4 Senate races that are not yet decided or definitively called for. So there's 4. There's 1 in North Carolina that we don't have the results official yet. We have 2 in Georgia that we don't have the results official yet. They are both going to a runoff election. Actually, we do have official results. They're both going to a runoff election in early January. And we, in the work we do at Common Power, will be very, very invested in those races, just FYI. And the Alaska race is not called yet. They still have about 130,000 votes to count up there. They still have a ways to go. They don't actually count any of their mail-in ballots until a week after the election. They allow ballots to keep coming in for a while by mail. But in all of the other Senate races that are here, which have been decided upon, there's only one state where the state as a whole had a majority vote for the presidential candidate of one party, and they voted for the Senate candidate who was from a different party. It was only one state. So I'm gonna give y'all a second to figure that one out, or for those of you that already know, for you to get mad and throw something at the wall. Okay, only one of the colored states here, the red or the blue, is a state that went for a president of one party and for the Senate candidate of a different party. And it is, unfortunately, Maine, the great state of Maine. And Susan Collins, and you know, I'm a person who's about give credit where credit's due. Susan Collins hit 50% and avoided a ranked choice voting outcome there. And she won even though Biden's carrying that state quite handily. And you got to just accept that and give that credit. I don't have any reason to believe that there's anything untoward about how that election unfolded. Susan Collins won. She did. And with that has meant that the Republicans currently have 50 seats in the US Senate. So the Democrats, in order to get control of it, are going to have to win. The one chance they've got at this point is to win either Alaska and one of the Georgia Senate seats, or to win both of the Georgia Senate seats. But in all of the other states called so far, they aligned between their presidential vote and their Senate vote. And they look very aligned in North Carolina and Georgia as well. How will this impact the Georgia Senate runoff when there's not a presidential vote on the ticket is going to be really, really interesting. And I think could benefit the Democrats quite a bit in Georgia. But this alignment of presidential and Senate seats in a presidential year is a second major pattern. A third major pattern is that youth of color were crucial. African Americans, Latinos in this country, Asian Americans, Native Americans were crucial in this country. Youth of color and youth are usually defined in voting circles as under 30. I think it should be perhaps like 53 and younger. That's the way I would define it. But we'll go with 18 to 29 years old. And the youth in America turned out in very high percentages. They're part of that historic turnout. There is an organization out of Tufts University that has an acronym of CIRCLE, which is something about civic engagement with younger people. It's something like this. And they've been tracking youth turnout for many, many years. And they are projecting the under 30 vote to be at about 53 to 56% of registered voters of that age classification will have turned out to vote. And if that 18 to 29 year olds hit 55% of that age population of under 30 turning out for registered voters, 55% of registered voters, then it will be the highest ever for under 30-year-old voters in this country, with the exception of the very first time that 18, 19, and 20-year-olds could vote, which was in 1972. So since 1972, this would be the highest percentage of under 30-year-olds in American history turning out to vote. So under 30-year-olds in general turned out substantially. Youth of color, my point isn't here about turnout. Their turnout was quite high along with all other youth, but they turned out to be crucial in who they voted for. So turnout is not about who the people voted for, it's just that you voted. What I want to make the point here in point 3 is who did these people vote for, okay? So I'm going to draw upon the CIRCLE analysis out of Tufts University, and they have broken down the voter preferences, the presidential preferences, by racial identities of 4 different groups. From left, Black voters, Asian voters, Latino voters, and white voters. And then I will have something to say also about Native American voters as well, but they're not on this chart. But they broke this under 30 vote out this way. And I want to show you a couple data points here to look at the vote preferences of these voters. Okay, so I'm going to start with white voters over here. And hopefully you can see the different colors that are represented there. But for all white voters under the age of 30 in this country, so 29 and younger, 53% of them voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and 42% voted for Donald Trump and Mike Pence. You know what? I'm going to put on some glasses. These are not going to be my permanent glasses, just so you know. These are like baby stroller glasses. These are just trials, okay? But I need to get glasses, and so I'm working on trying out. These are the kinds you get at the store for really cheap, but then you can try them out. Okay, so if you don't like the frames, it's okay, because I'll get better ones eventually. And they're like really foggy because I don't clean them very well, but I don't have to lean in so close to the screen. So I'm going to try them out. So white voters under 30 went 53 to 42 for Biden. Okay, so they voted for Biden. Now I want to look at the other three racial classes on this chart for the under 30 voters and look at their vote distributions, okay? Latino vote 75 to 21 for Biden. Asian American vote 83 to 13. And Black youth 88 to 9, overwhelmingly for Biden. It is a reasonable case, and Circle has this great analysis paper that they've written on the web if you want to go look them up, that if you drop the youth turnout by like 3% across the board, if you drop the turnout, then Joe Biden doesn't become president of the United States, because these folks particularly turned out in key battleground states. And to use just one example, in Georgia, which looks like Joe Biden is going to win, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to win it in really a paradigm shifting moment for how we think about the South. Incredible. In that state, when you look at 65 and older voters, they were quite strongly for Trump. This is across racial groups, quite strongly for Trump. When you look at 40 to 45 to 64-year-olds, they were slightly better, slightly stronger for Trump. When you look at 30 to 45-year-olds, they were slightly stronger for Biden. But when you look at that, so when you take that age voting distribution and know that older voters vote in higher percentages, that's a pretty strongly pro-Trump environment, maybe 60-40, maybe more like 57-43 in the state. But when you looked at under 29-year-old voters, they were strongly for Biden. And Black voters in the state in particular turned out and helped to win that state for Joe Biden, or at least to put him in position to win that state. So the youth of color vote in this country was crucial. And I think that if there are any stereotypes that linger out there about youth voters or about youth of color, we really just need to just smash those and grind those under our foot, because it is these voters in places like Atlanta and Richmond and Dallas and Houston and in Phoenix and in Charlotte and in Detroit and Milwaukee and Lansing and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh that are winning this election for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. All right? They are. All right, fourth pattern. Incumbent presidents are a tough hill to climb. You may think, we may think, that the presidency of Donald Trump is so abominable. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce that. So horrible that how could he possibly be reelected? But incumbents have so many advantages. They dominate the news environment, and no one's dominated it like this president. They have the power of the position to hold events, rallies, and all kinds of things at the White House. They get to appoint Supreme Court justices in these travesty kind of moments just before an election. They get to wield threatening power in all kinds of ways. And so to beat an incumbent president is not an easy endeavor in this country, because one other attribute that makes him tough to beat is because people have voted enough one time to put him in the White House, even if they didn't get the majority vote in 2016. Still, I think it was 63 million people voted for Donald Trump last time. And those voters are psychologically invested. And so it's hard to get them to like move from that. Some do, but it's very, very hard. And so I think that we need to keep that in mind, that what is happening here is a very, very difficult and uncommon endeavor to beat an incumbent president. In fact, Trump will be only the fourth incumbent in 108 years in the United States to lose. When you go back to 1912, when Woodrow Wilson was elected for his first term, there's only been 3 before Donald Trump incumbent presidents who have been defeated when they ran for re-election. It was Herbert Hoover, it was Jimmy Carter, and it was George H.W. Bush. Okay, there's only been 3 in there. And we right now have just had back-to-back back-to-back two-term presidents with Clinton, Bush, and Obama. So the reality is that this is a tough hill to climb. And as much as we might have thought that it would be painfully apparent to everybody in the world that he should be defeated and that there should be an easy victory here, that just isn't real. That just isn't grounded in the real structural challenges that come with beating an incumbent president. One other thing I want to note, though, is that this is from Eric Columbus, who's somebody that I follow, Josh Marshall, and Josh Marshall retweeted him, that when the count is complete, President-elect Joe Biden will have won more votes percentage-wise of any challenger since FDR beat Hoover in 1932. Biden is probably going to hit about 51% nationally, and that is higher than any challenger since 1932. Ronald Reagan hit 50.7. Bill Clinton didn't get to 50 because there were 3 candidates in 1992. So this is a remarkable endeavor. And then there's this great follow-up snark line, and Trump did indeed finally win more votes than Hillary Clinton this election. This time, he did. It's a mark of stain on our country that that Trump has ever been president, and that he's gonna, at this point in time, be the second highest vote getter of all time. But it goes Biden, Trump, Clinton, Trump, Obama, Obama. All right. Incumbent presidents are tough to beat. And then fifth, this is something that my colleague Charles Douglas and I have been talking about on podcasts that we're running. The pre-Trump world is gone. There is no thing that we are ever going to reclaim in our civic space that is some kind of panacea or special environment where the pre-Trump world is gone. I mean, where it's gone. We're never going back to that. And although Joe Biden has talked about reclaiming the soul of America, the reality is that we're going to be constructing anew the soul of America, not from scratch, but it's going to be a new endeavor that takes into account a new reality that we live in. The pre-Trump world is gone. And this means a couple things. For Republicans, it means that we continue, even in this moment, up to this very minute, we continue to see Republicans being afraid to cross Donald Trump and on board with him, and having decided that this is the worldview they want to take, this worldview of claiming these baseless claims about a fraud in this election. The power of the Trump family. We just don't have Republicans in the same way that we used to. There might be a voice here or there, but that party is gone. It is not coming back. I'm hoping that something new will be exciting and built there and positive in the years to come, but we're not going to find that party again. It is not there. Our political norms will never be the same. The notion of using an attorney general for your own political power, the constancy of denigrating allies, people you disagree with, calling the media fake media, all of that, these political norms are never coming back. They are not coming back. The lies from the president, how do you deal with the lies of a president? We've done better in year 4, but still, the notion that a president is going to tell the truth, that expectation, I just don't, I mean, it doesn't seem to matter at this point in time very much. And the news media are clearly continuing to find their way in how they cover this new political world. And I do believe that they have done some really good things in the last couple months around COVID and around the claims of fraud in the election, or in voting in general, and then in the election from Trump at all. But the news media continue to have to continue to struggle to find their new kind of approach to covering this civic life. So we're not going back. The pre-Trump world is gone. So too is the pre-COVID world. Even when we come back together as a country after COVID, and whatever that means after COVID, the reality is that we're going to be scarred by this experience in ways that we will carry with us. Excuse me. So those are 5 patterns that I wanted to draw attention to. These are all things that happy to talk about in the chat or other things you want to bring up with during the Q&A. These are all pieces that are really, really important and I believe shape this outcome dramatically. Dramatically. There are other things too. Women voters turned out strongly for Joe Biden. Suburban voters did. There are a reality of some of the changing demographics across the country. There's a lot of other things I could talk about, but these 5 to me really spoke to the on the ground specifics that unfolded. I want to now spend 10 minutes talking about the kind of defining piece though that I think that we're going to carry with us forever as like that I want to say like this is what the history books will talk about this election meant. What did this election mean? And I want to suggest that it's about voting is what this election was about. And we haven't had a presidential election that has been about voting in my lifetime, about who can vote and how we can vote. Who can vote and how we can vote. So this is the electoral map as it stands right now if we are conservative in making our calls. I fully expect Joe Biden is going to win Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And I think he still has a chance in North Carolina. But I've left them as uncalled at this time. So what we've got here are the states that have been decisively won one way or another. And I want to take a little road trip. And this road trip is going to start in Minnesota, swing east, and then south, and then west. And I want to highlight how important voting, who gets to vote and how they get to vote, have been in the key states in this country. This is an election that first and last has put voting at the center of the American democracy. And it's not that it's never been there before, but I don't think it's ever been the focus of a conversation in our environment the way it has this time. And this is one of those ironic things that the president actually has done without any positive intent, has done a service to the country by putting focus, his constancy of focus on voting and his lies about it have led many others to engage and mobilize. But just to give a quick road trip, in Minnesota, there is no excuse absentee voting, and which allows people to request a ballot at any point in time. They have same-day voter registration. These are innovations that have made Minnesota one of the highest voting states in the country. Consistently, Minnesota is either 1 or 2 in terms of voter registration turnout. And when you have that with an engaged electorate, you're going to shake off the closeness of 2016 and win quite comfortably. It is the state where Joe Biden, the blue state, where Joe Biden made the biggest gains from 2016 to 2020 because of these voting practices that were there combined with that voter turnout, that massive voter turnout. We're driving east, and so we go into Wisconsin, we go over to Madison and to La Crosse and to Milwaukee. And what we see here is a state with some of the worst voter suppression in the country, laws that make it so hard to vote, gerrymandering that is just unconscionable, and a state where in the midst of COVID's first wave this spring, the Democrats figured out how to do mail-in balloting, and they perfected it by the time we got to the fall. And that engagement, the ability to use no excuse absentee balloting that they got down and how to figure it out, allowed that state, with the mobilization of the people on the ground, to turn that state from 20%, 22,000 votes plus for Trump in 2016 to 20,000 votes plus for Biden in 2020. That state, if I'm correct, in either 5 of the last 6 or 6 of the last 7 presidential elections has been decided by less than 1%. In that environment, the ability to vote becomes determinative. As you go over east, you go across Lake Michigan on the ferry over to Michigan, and you show up over there and you go through Western Michigan, through Grand Rapids et al., through Lansing, Ann Arbor, and over to Detroit, to my hometown of Dearborn, what we see is a state that had voting reforms in 2018, unlike any except Nevada in this country. They implemented automatic voter registration, where you can register to vote just by engaging with the state to get your driver's license. They implemented same-day voter registration. They implemented no excuse absentee ballot as a system. They also have a new independent redistricting commission in place for the district drawing that's coming up. That surged voter turnout in that state, and that state will never be the same because of that. No excuse absentee balloting is a game changer. Automatic voter registration, a game changer. Continue going east and you get into Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania implemented no excuse absentee balloting they implemented it after 2018 for the very first time. They struggled with it tremendously in the spring during their primary, and they're still counting ballots there, but they are getting it down now. And the turnout among Democrats through no excuse absentee balloting through the roof. All right. To me, that determines this election when you look at those vote totals that have come in through that methodology in that state. We're going south now, down to North Carolina, where they have been fighting off voter ID laws for several years from the Republicans, and they got a court to hold that voter ID law at bay through the 2020 election, so it's not in place. They have one version, but not a more terrible version. They have no excuse absentee balloting that got expanded so that votes can arrive after election day, even though postmarked, as long as postmarked by election day. So they're still counting ballots. They're going to count ballots through November 12th there. That's a state where democracy's on the march. And whether Biden or Trump win it, that state is going to be a nail biter for years to come, because more highly educated, more diverse people have now gaining the right to vote in that state. We go down to Georgia. They implemented automatic voter registration in 2016. And in 2018, when Stacey Abrams either narrowly lost legitimately or had it stolen from her, they had increased their voter turnout dramatically from them. And then in this election, they increased options for how people could get absentee ballots and had drop boxes all over the state. And that ability increased, along with an incredibly engaged electorate led by Fair Fight and Stacey Abrams, led to this moment in time where the Dems are about to win that state. We keep going west, and in Texas, they implemented a full week of additional early voting. So even though the drop boxes in the state were an abomination in terms of allowing only one per county, we had a full more week of early voting, and it put Texas voting through the roof. Okay, all right. That's what more days of early voting can do. We need to fight in that state to keep that in place. That will be a challenge for us. Then you get over to Arizona, which has a permanent early vote list that you can get on so that you're always receiving an absentee ballot. And they got put into place this year the ability to count absentee ballots before Election Day. The Democratic Secretary of State got that done. And so they've been able to count votes. And I believe that the call by Fox News on election night of Arizona was a historic defining moment in this election. It made a statement that Biden was not going to get swept away as Clinton had in those late arriving ballots. And although it's been narrowing, Biden has held onto his lead, and all evidence suggests that he's gonna get through. And in fact, ballots are supposed to come in at, I think, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock our time tonight for Maricopa County, which could be determinative in that state and really finalize that Biden's gonna win. And then you got Nevada. In Nevada in 2018, implemented automatic voter registration, elected the first majority female state legislature in US history. And then those folks put into place all mail balloting this year. And they're gonna become like Washington State, all mail balloting. And they had a turnout that was through the roof as well. And the Dems right now, they're still counting absentee ballots in that state. And those ballots, which Dems dominated, have put Biden out of harm's way. Biden Harris out of harm's way in these states. So most of the time when we talk about elections, we talk about the issues that were fought over: climate change, education, healthcare, coronavirus. And I'm not saying none of those mattered, but we moved the fight for voting to the center of this discussion, and the president did too. And we will not come back from that. That is a threshold situation, and it is incumbent on all of us to make sure it stays there. And Nancy Pelosi announced yesterday, might have been this morning, I don't know, these days have blurred together a little bit for me, that HR 1, which is the voting rights reform bill that they've passed already, will be legislation number 1 for the House of Representatives in 2021. All right, that's what we're fighting for. Because when you let the people vote, good things start to happen for democracy. That's where we're going. We have to devote our time and treasure to get there. All right. We can never not turn out again. And we need to do the work to make sure it happens. So these are the high level kind of thoughts that I have about this election, the patterns, and then this defining piece. You know, the notion that a presidential candidate or a vice presidential candidate like Biden and Harris would be talking throughout their campaign about the importance of voting and when to vote and how to vote, which they did constantly. Or that a presidential candidate on the other side would also be talking about when to vote and how to vote in a very hostile way towards voting, has never been anything we've seen. It has been, I'm the president in this election. That is a threshold shift. That is a paradigm shift moment. The work that I'm doing through good fortune happens to be right at the center of that work. These lectures will continue to be focused on that. The work that I will do will stay dialed into this. The work that we all do needs to stay dialed into this. And we have to believe that as more people get the right to vote and the ability to vote, that we will get better politicians who will win a really robust debate around topics, because more people will be involved in it, and that can build a better America. It isn't going to be easy, but it is a necessary condition for a better America. We aren't getting to a better America without more voting justice. We just aren't. Okay. I have the great fortune of working with some incredible colleagues at Common Power. And I want to pop up my screen again here for a second. Let's see here. No. Oh, yep. Let's see here. This is the team at Common Power. Our team. And across this list, you got Charles and AJ and Maria and Daniel and MJ and Wole and Larcy and Kylie and Bert and Jamie Lynn and Betty, and then our most recent person we hired full-time, Vanna. All right. I have had the ability, I mean, the fortune to work with some incredible young people and older people too at the University of Washington in my time there. The chance to work with this team is an absolute pinnacle moment, a highlight of my life. They're incredible. So this is a shout out to them, and for all of you that are involved with us, this is a privilege for us to work with them and to support them and to learn from them. And for those of you that aren't engaged with us, come along. We got a lot of voting justice work to do. And we bring different skill sets to this. Wole has done a tremendous amount of work in the community over this last election, getting people voter registered and supporting people who are seeking to vote. Larcy built this Action Academy for college age students that we just built on the fly this year. And there's 60 plus of them that have been part of it for 12 weeks long. AJ has created this incredible Lunch and Learn program and another program called Article Club, where she talks about American history through the lens of Black history. Because these two things are interwoven together. They are DNA connected. And I could go on and on and on. One of them I asked to come tonight, Charles Douglas, to come and talk about an idea that he and I have been batting around. It's his idea, and I've been kind of like serving as a sounding board for him. And it's coming out of the work we're doing together, but it's also just some insights that he has about this election. And, you know, we're partners in leading Common Power. And you know, it's the best. It's incredible to work with Charles. He's wrong a lot. That's a joke. We just tease each other a little bit. He's actually right a lot, and we get to spend a lot of time. And in fact, we spent so much time together. We get along so well that we spent 2 weeks together in an RV in September, going across this country, seeing our partners and some of our volunteers. And you just don't do that with somebody unless you're either A, married to them, or B, can really, really get along with them and have good conversations. But I asked Charles tonight to come and talk about one specific framework that he's developing that informs where we're going, I believe, informs where we're going as an organization and where we're going as a country. And I wanted him to bring that tonight, and then for us to layer together his thoughts with the pieces I've brought for us to do some Q&A with everybody. So I'm going to come off a share, and I asked Paul if he could promote Charles as a panelist for us, and I'm going to bring Charles in. Hey, how you doing, man?
Hey, man.
Good to see you.
I'm in. I'm on the other side. I made it.
So Charles wears a hat all the time. It's a defining characteristic of him. My sweater is mine. All right. I got the sweater. Charles got a hat. All right.
Yeah, you have glasses now. You got glasses now, man.
I know. I'm still getting used to them. There's a reflection, like the light, you know, is reflecting back. But hey, look, I appreciate that you've come in and joined me on this, and I want to just basically step aside and let you introduce your idea. Okay.
Well, so I know we talked about that, but I actually, after hearing your part, I actually think I want to talk through this with you.
Okay. All right.
And so it'll kind of be a live version of what we've been doing on the podcast recently. And so I've got one slide, but I've also got the whiteboard just in case.
Yeah.
Okay? We've got a digital whiteboard that we use. And so I've got that just in case we want to do some live thinking with folks. I want to start by saying though that this is a real treat. I think I joined CP back in March of 2018, and I started as a volunteer that was just curious about this, and David kind of tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I would come on board on the leadership team. And we've been thinking about 2020, about this election for years. And we both left, along with a bunch of our colleagues, our day jobs to do this work, to win this election. And so to be on the eve of that with you, and to have so many of our plans and our dreams and our hopes realized, this is a really powerful moment, man. This is a big, big deal. In addition to that, I think I've had the pleasure of coming to your lectures and kind of sitting in the audience and judging you a little bit, actually live, back when we had lectures in person. And for those of you who have been to lectures, I was often the guy who would close the doors or take the tickets in the beginning, the little slices of paper that were not really tickets. So it's a treat to be on this side. And I got to say to you, David, that it's meant a lot doing this work with you, man. It really, really has. And I know that you see me as an equal in a lot of ways, but I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a ton from you, and it's been a great ride. And just like I say to everyone else, we're just getting started. And I really feel like that, and I know you do too. So I wanted to say that part. We didn't talk about this, but I had to put that out there, man.
Okay, you that's all you got. I'll see you later. All right. No, thanks. Folks paid a big price for this tonight, so you need to deliver. Okay.
Okay. Well, I mean, so the conversations that we have are pretty robust, and I think one of the things that you and I do together really well is we see patterns, and this is a pattern that I saw that I decided to outline into something, and you kind of told me the name was wrong, but I'm going to keep the name. We're going to keep the name. So I'm going to share my screen here. First, I'm going to show the beginning, and I hope, let's see if I get this right, man. First, oh, I don't have permission to share. Okay.
Well, I wasn't going to give you permission until I heard what you said.
Oh, that's
Okay.
good. No, that's
Okay.
really good. That's a smart move, man, because I could have just blown up your entire lecture. You don't want that.
While you're doing that, as a quick aside, we did have our first Zoom bomb the other day for an event we did, right?
We did, and it was exciting because that was proof that we'd made it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Charles, you should be able to share. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so David talked a lot about the fact that this election was about voting, who could vote and who couldn't vote. Some of the trends that came out of, that we're still seeing come out of that election. I think the way that he and I are complementary is that I look at why from a different angle. I look at why from how we as an organization that's growing, how we can implement some of the work that folks are doing to get to the same finish line. And so my why that I look at are who are the people, who are the organizations that are out there moving the pieces around to help us get to where we are. Some of the key things that he outlined that you and I, David, will talk about as I kind of reveal this are who moved the youth vote, who convinced these young folks to come out and vote. Because we're seeing now that Trump is not enough. It's not just that he's bad that'll get folks out of their seats to go and vote, especially in a COVID environment. You got to tell them how to do it. Many of these folks are brand new voters. And so who did they trust to get them out of their seats? And then on the House side, who made it easy for them to learn about voting, for them to learn about the folks who are running for office, and then to go and actually vote? So I believe that we are in the midst of a voting renaissance. The second part of this, the reason why I think it's a renaissance, is because one, it's a callback to the civil rights movement and a lot of what our leaders did, and we are now carrying on. And I'll come back to that, and you'll come back to that for sure. But also, I think it has a permanence. There's a permanence there. And what this election result has taught us that we've talked about is that our work does not significantly change after this election. And that's different from what we thought when we talked, right? We thought that maybe we would put out this fire and we'd go back to some sort of normal. And really what this proved out is that not only is there more work to be done, but there's so much that was built to get to this moment that that's not going anywhere either. So the voting renaissance right now, and these are, David, this is your first time seeing these terms, man. Okay, so we're gonna workshop this a little bit, but I think it comes in these three parts. It comes in celebrity capital, mostly sports figures that young folks and people of color trust. Okay, keep that one. Grassroots incorporated. So grassroots movements are not new. We didn't invent grassroots movements for the 2020 election. But what we did do is we professionalized them. And we gave them structures that look kind of sort of like business structures so that they persist beyond just a movement. When the emotion washes away, how do we make it so that these things continue on? Okay. The last part is a digital infrastructure. You're on Zoom right now, so I don't need to prove to you why digital tools matter in a pandemic. But these pieces that were put in place long before 2020 are game changers to sustaining this progressive effort beyond 2020. David, what do you think so far, man? Just a thumbs up, that's it? Okay. All right, he's like, I gotta see more before I chime in. Okay, so here's piece number one, LeBron James. And in each of these different buckets, there are many, many examples. So I'm going to highlight one or two, because it's about the concept. There's LeBron James. It's a picture of him at a game, kneeling, arm in arm with his fellow players, with a T-shirt that's about something valuable. And he's done this before. He's done this around police shootings, Black Lives Matter for sure. But he's talking about voting. Now, this is a key piece, and David mentioned this, but it was backed up by civil rights leaders who said that they had never seen a movement like the Black Lives Matter movement that ended in voting as the action. Marching is the beginning. The demonstration was the beginning. Voting is the agreed upon action that is new for this movement. LeBron James understands that. LeBron James and I are about the same age. The difference that he does in this time is that he doesn't just lend his face to an existing effort. He doesn't just donate to the Dems. He creates his own organization. He creates his own organization, and he's already got a bunch of businesses. He devoted $100 million to a media organization with one of his best friends. A portion of that money goes specifically to this organization called More Than a Vote, to get out the vote for the 2020 election, yes, and to set up a foundation for doing that same thing in every election after this. What else is significant about LeBron James? LeBron James is not retired. He's not on the way down. He's not in decline. He is at the top of his game, and more importantly, the top of his earning power. There is no professional athlete right now that has a larger megaphone than LeBron James. And what did he use it for? He used it to get people to vote, to register to vote. And he put real capital and real business interests behind voting this year and every year after this. So that's one thing. Go ahead, David.
There's nobody in Seattle, though, that exemplifies this. There's nobody here in town. I mean, I don't understand. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see it here. That's a joke. I'm joking, of course.
No, because you're right. In the conversations, and if you've listened to our podcast, I do mention Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe as other folks that are very active in this space. And I said I was going to do one example per, but it's really important to mention them. These are the folks that cut across multiple sports. This is happening across the sports industry. Go ahead, David.
Well, I just want to say, so Sue Bird and the whole WNBA, which has made a very big point about Kelly Loeffler and the problem that she is in the WNBA. Well, Loeffler's in this runoff in Georgia. So for anybody out there who is connected to Sue at all, just say that we are ready to go to Georgia together to do this work, to beat Kelly Loeffler.
Yeah, in a very real way. At a tactical level, one of the reasons why David and I have 3 slides for you tonight is because we are right now planning for hundreds of volunteers to get engaged in those 2 special elections that are going to happen in January, with the possibility of a physical trip there. We are fired up to win back the Senate, and we see a path. Okay, the next part, Grassroots Incorporated. 2018. So we started this organization in 2018. And in 2018, it was the blue wave. We see that now. Huge shift. We won the House. And we lost also. We lost. We lost in Florida. We lost in Georgia. And we lost in Texas. Those were huge. They were gut-wrenching. We left an election day party that night thinking that we did not do well at all. I remember, David, you were dejected. It was a tough night. It was a really, really tough night. Those politicians that ran for office and lost did not leave the people. They did not leave the people. Andrew Gillum in Florida kept fighting. Beto in Texas created a group called Powered by People that is the reason why Texas was even considered a swing state in this election. And then, of course, Stacey Abrams created Fair Fight. One of the things that's a fact is that when you run for office, you get an infusion of capital. You get a ton of money. A lot of that money goes back to the Dems, either at the state level or at the national level. These folks took a lot of that real capital and political capital they had earned when they ran, and they flipped that into grassroots movements that were built on organizations that were innovative in their form. Powered by People specifically is what's called a hybrid PAC. It is a super PAC and a political action committee. And I think they may actually have a 501c3 attached to that as well, David. I don't remember. But what this allows them to do is to work with elected officials or with folks that are running for office. It allows them to raise as much money as they want to through the super PAC. And it allows them to be as flexible as possible in mobilizing human beings to do this work. That is something that is unprecedented, especially in Florida, in Texas. And that's why you see the numbers in Texas that David talked about. Stacey Abrams, we can talk about Stacey Abrams all day long. If you get on Twitter, everyone is talking about Stacey Abrams. She basically delivered Georgia to us, not by herself, but in a big, big way. And if you talk to folks like Ben Wickler in Wisconsin, he'll tell you that she did a lot to help Wisconsin win as well. She will run for office again, and we will knock on doors for her for sure. The last piece of this, and I think we're going to go to Q&A after this, is the digital infrastructure. And you're going to see some brands here that look familiar to you. ActBlue for sure. The thing that folks don't know about these three pieces and many more is that these organizations are progressive organizations. They support Democratic candidates. There are no Republicans you can give money to on ActBlue. And what these are, so ActBlue is a funding structure. NGP Van, for those of you who have done door-to-door canvassing for folks who use Minivan, they're the ones who make that app. And then Target Smart, if you know someone named David Domke, then you know that he's been talking about Target Smart for weeks as one of his key sources of trusted data in the lead up to Election Day. All these organizations were born from the original kind of catalyst to so much of this stuff, and that's Barack Obama. The folks that went on to make these organizations, these companies, actually, these are for-profit companies, most of these. They were trained, they cut their teeth in the Obama administration, Obama campaign and administration, 2008, 2012, and took what they learned to create these organizations and businesses to fill the gaps that weren't there. The things that they had to do at a grassroots level, that they had to invent, they went and created these things and laid a foundation for progressive infrastructure on our side. All of these things together make up something that, again, does not go away after 2020. This is the change that we're just now seeing begin, we think. And they were tested in 2020. They were tested in this election. Imagine this. Voter suppression was rampant in key states in this election. Imagine in America where these forces and organizations like ours fight for voting justice, fight voter suppression, and fully unleash an electorate that can be heard for the first time. That is the big structural change that Elizabeth Warren talked about. There are a lot of people that wanted to vote that didn't get their vote counted this year. And that, because of these folks and because of folks like us, will never happen again. Not on our watch.
My kind of high level thought coming out of this is Well, first, of course, your graphics are better than mine. Okay, so that's good. That's like that's there. It's great how you pulled this together. My big thought about this is that, and maybe this is correct, and maybe it's not entirely correct, but it's my first reaction, is that none of these three pieces have been derived through the Democratic Party.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
They are not hostile to the Democratic Party, not by anything at all. Act Blue is the major conduit to donations, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Stacey Abrams is deeply intertwined in the Democratic Party. Beto, of course, ran as a Democrat, but these are not Democratic Party apparatuses.
That's right. That's right. And it's actually that independence that has allowed them to innovate. The Democratic Party is it's a pathway, and they have created different vehicles for progressive agendas to move through to change policy. And it's not that they'll never be integrated into the Democratic Party. I mean, we see after this election, there's a lot that the Democrats need to fix. If they're smart, there will be, and I'm going to use a business analog here because I come from 13 years at Starbucks corporate, but there will be some acquisitions. If the Democrats are smart, they will wholesale try to absorb some of these pieces here and make it a standard part of the party. That's the next step. But I think we're a little far out from that. I think that some of these folks will have to get into party leadership for us to get into that part. It's still very grassroots incorporated.
I think that independence, which we prize as well at Common Power, but also the deep connectivity to Democratic candidates is what you talk about with Grassroots Inc. So a hybrid PAC, super PAC organization, which we are at Common Power, allows them and us to work hand in hand for certain candidates. And then we have this super PAC that raises larger dollars. In our case, we also have a 501c3 that's able to raise certain money that we use for C3 purposes for educational lines. But the super PAC, which in the mind of the public is overwhelmingly defined solely as an organization, like as a concept that runs ads, that runs advertisements. But that's not how we use a super PAC. It's not how Beto O'Rourke uses a super PAC. It's not how Black PAC uses a super PAC. They use it to register voters and to get out the vote. They have to do it separate from the party, but that's already written into the DNA of the organization to begin with, that they're going to be separate from the party. So building those apparatuses are not like, oh, gee, we got to now somehow come up with these. No, from the beginning, they're like, we're going to build our own.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of like it is like a company that spins off a startup or something, and they basically say, hey, go and separate from us and go invent something really, really cool and then come back with a solution. What that also means, though, is that these organizations and these individuals are a check on the party. They're a check on the party. And so there's a lot of challenge to commonly held standards. And that's where you see that shift towards something more progressive, something that an astute politician like a Joe Biden says, yeah, okay, I'll listen to you. I'll incorporate some of that into what I'm talking about. And we saw him do that in this election.
Sure. So we have an election in which voting was one of like the defining issues. Maybe I'm saying it's like a threshold thing for this nation, that we're not going back to not having people fighting for voting in a very vocal way. That's there. Then you have these infrastructure pieces that you're talking about here, or these interlocking forces in our on the progressive side. And there's been a lot of questions, and then we're going to start to do Q&A here. A lot of folks have asked me and us over the last 2 years, let's just say the Dems were to win 2020 in all the ways they wanted to. And we know today that we haven't, although we're making good progress. But they said, let's say that happens. Won't the Dems just, or won't the progressives just do what they did before, which is kind of leave the field and just let it go? And my take on it has been, no, that won't happen at all, because there's a paradigm shift in understanding the importance of this as a everyday endeavor to do this work. And that's our philosophy too. But we're not alone out there. Like, these organizations have staying power. Stacey Abrams decided not to run for the Senate.
That's right.
Because she wanted to do this. And because she wanted to do this, there might actually be a presidential victory in Georgia plus two senators. Okay, that is a multiplier effect. Yeah.
So before we go to questions, I want to blow your mind one more time. Ready? Here we go. So the voting renaissance in a micro level happened in Seattle. And I want to say that the celebrity capital that launched CP was the David Domke brand, the Seattle celebrity. Okay. Kind of, sort of, man. That was the celebrity capital. That was you.
I muted you.
That's really good. That's really good. Now you gotta hear this part. You gotta hear this part. Okay. It was you utilizing that and leveraging everything you'd built through like these lectures into our version of Grassroots Incorporated. Okay. So that's where I come along, and we have the conversation with our advisor, and he says, listen, if you're going to be doing these things, you need to become this entity. And then you and I start planning it, right? That's to make it a more permanent effort so that we can do the work safer and start to build a foundation to scale up. And that term scale came from me, right? We got to scale up. I have a vision of this expanding to other cities. And you're like, Charles, you're crazy. And I probably am. And also, we're going to expand this to other cities. And then that last piece is what we're doing right now.
Yep.
The way that we pivoted in February to an all digital version of something that was all in person. Everything was in person. You were handing out pieces of paper at introductory workshops, and now it's completely digital. This voting renaissance, it happened in Seattle already, and we are the first test case of this.
I mean, I see the logic of us. I would be hesitant to say we're the first or the best or anything like that, but we're building a killer app, to use the technology term, right? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That was for Paul. All right. Our producer. All right.
Good.
But I totally see what you're talking about here, that, and I would say that the celebrity capital also is I appreciate what you're saying. I thank you. I would say, as important for that celebrity capital were certain people in our community who have believed in us.
Yes, 100%.
And have gone to bat for us to get to build the resources that we needed to have to do this, right?
100%. Yep. That's exactly right.
We have people take a chance on us.
It's a huge chance.
Right. All right, let's do some Q&A. This is going to pivot mostly away from CP, a little bit of CP into the election stuff. So I'm going to
jump off
close off the screen. All right. I'm going to be looking in the Q&A, folks. So not in the chat. Let's see. Okay, let me take this piece, this political renaissance, voting renaissance, and weave it together with some other orgs that are embedded in your thinking, Charles, but you didn't mention. Okay, Indivisible, which this Deborah here notes is 86% women, I guess, nationally. Okay, Blue Revolution, Move On, let's add Swing Left, Flippable, Sister District. Where do they fit in here?
Yeah, I think those are in that Stacey Abrams category. That's like Grassroots Incorporated. Indivisible, I remember being at work. I remember being in the office at Starbucks, and somebody printed off the initial Indivisible memo, and they gave it to me in like a manila folder, like it was a secret document or something. I remember this because it didn't start off with, "Hey, we're going to form an organization." Remember, it was kind of like, "Here's how you mobilize around the country," and then it became something. It became something bigger, and so that was digital grassroots right there in the purest definition, and all those organizations fit right there. Now, the one difference is that they're not attached to a celebrity or a person, but they are in that realm of professionalizing a grassroots movement so that it can sustain beyond just the initial emotional catalyst. That's
Okay.
the difference between movements now and movements before, is that there is something that looks kind of sort of like a formal business organization.
Um, okay, I'm going to answer a question, but I'm going to give you one so that you're on deck to answer. If these grassroots orgs are acquired, to use your word, by the DNC, don't they risk losing their power and influence? How do they stay nimble, creative, responsive to the people? So you just think about that for a
Got
minute.
it.
Janet asked about, how about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact as a way to reform the Electoral College? Is this something I could see CP working on? Janet, absolutely. It is on our policy agenda for post 2020. One important outcome in this election is that Colorado, which has been a swing state, is mostly a blue state now, but did adopt it through their legislature a couple of years ago. But the Republicans in the legislature didn't like it. So they through the levers of the way they work in Colorado, they were able to get it as a ballot initiative, which could repudiate what the legislature had done. So it was a statewide ballot initiative. And what the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is a set of it's states one by one deciding by vote by either popular vote or legislature vote to join this networked compact of states around the country who agree that once there's enough states that have joined the compact that tally more than 270 electoral college votes, that all the states in the compact will devote their states electoral college votes to the winner of the popular vote. Okay. This is complicated, but the reason this is being imagined is because it's a way to get around amending the Constitution. If this is a set of states making these decisions and they want to get into a compact together, there's nothing stopping them. Like we have climate compacts, for example, that work together around climate change in this country. We are at about 195 votes right now in the Electoral College of states that have committed to this. And Colorado just had a ballot initiative about whether they should stay in this or not. And it passed. It did pass. It passed, I think, 53-47 in the state. So they're going to stay in it. It is a feasible possibility that states that we could crudely just call blue states in this country could pass this before 2024 and get rid of the Electoral College through this mechanism. I think there's momentum to this. I want to work on this. It's going to be one of the series of things that we're going to work on. Absolutely. In fact, my son, who's 13 and has been on the podcast and has done some phone calls with me, was talking to me about the Electoral College. And he's like, "Dad, it's a problem." I'm like, I know. So yeah. All right. Your question about the acquiring.
Yeah. So, and there's another one about how do you envision working with the DNC? They don't support a progressive agenda. So this is a common issue that any startup organization has to think about when they are absorbed or want to partner with an organization that's older or more conservative. And the one reason why businesses or organizations do join these larger organizations is because they believe that it'll do more good. The larger organizations have something the smaller ones don't almost all the time, and that's scale. They have more people that they can reach that trust their brand, that know who they are. And these smaller organizations have this dream of the thing that they are doing being able to touch more people. And so I could see the trade-off where they say, I want the megaphone of the Democratic Party more than I need to control this organization. That's one thing. The other thing is that I full well believe that the Democratic Party will change. Younger generations and people with different ways of thinking are going to change the agenda. Some of these folks will join en masse. There will be a movement of people, especially after this election, that say, you know what, I want to make change from the inside. And they will jump in head first to be able to do that, again, at scale.
All right, let's see if we can run through a bunch of questions with some quick answers that probably won't be fully satisfactory to people, but we can hit a bunch. So what can we do for Georgia for right now in the runoff elections? And what about 2022? Can the Democrats get the Senate in 2022, whether or not they get the Senate right now? I think right now on Georgia, they have voter registration available there through December 7th, and early voting starts December 14th. We as an organization will be putting together a plan for engaging in Georgia. We're just targeting the 20th to give us a little bit of time, but it will include
November 20th.
Yeah, November 20th. It will include a remote work. We are going to try to plan for travel, to go travel there and do work. We might have an advanced team that goes in early for us. How long will we be there? All of that. So right now, the most important thing I think you can do to support the Georgia runoff candidates is to either A, give money to Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff, or B, start doing remote work for voter reg organizations in Georgia. And you're just going to have to Google that because we haven't done that research yet. That's what you could do right now. The second thing you can do, though, shortly after that is join Common Power and be part of our work in Georgia. And it will be substantial. It'll be substantial.
Oh, yeah. Everything will be pointed towards those two races. Yeah.
Yeah. For 2022, I actually think that the odds favor the Democrats at this point in time it's a tough electoral map for the Republicans. When you look at the Senate races that are up, there's an open seat in North Carolina with the Republican retiring. There's an open seat in Pennsylvania with the Republican retiring, and there's likely to be an open seat in Wisconsin, or Ron Johnson will run for re-election. Those are three states that we can absolutely flip those Senate seats, okay? And what the Dems need to do in all of those states, I believe, is pick candidates that capture the kind of things that Charles is talking about, all right? So the mistake that the Democrats made is they had Cal Cunningham, who appealed to old school Democrats, but then when he had these scandals, it undercut him, okay? We need Stacey Abrams, who will be on the ballot in 2022 as a governor, most likely in Georgia. We need more of those kind of candidates, and I think we got a great shot in 2022. So I don't think we come out of this election expecting a backlash against Biden and Harris, not at all. I think we come out of this election riding this and harnessing this energy.
Yeah. There's another question here that asks about, this is a great question. This is one that you're going to want to answer too, where should money get put into organizations that do this work versus candidates? So yeah, I'll let you give a take. I'm going to say that realistically, you still got to give money to candidates, and the folks knocking on doors when there's an election and when there's not an election, and building a trusted brand in the community are these organizations that are already on the ground. The folks that are going to be knocking on doors in Arizona in January are not going to be any candidates. It's going to be the same folks that were there that are asking people if they've got enough to eat, if they care about their schools, that kind of thing. Those are the people that regular citizens remember. They remember these organizations, and they go, listen, if New Virginia is not telling me that I need to do this, make this vote, I'm not doing it. If Mi Familia Vote in Arizona is not telling me, if New Georgia Project is not telling me, if Advanced Carolina is not telling me that this person is legit, then I'm not going to get out the vote because I trust them, because they came to me and asked me what I needed when there was no elections going on. I would say your money is better spent in those types of organizations.
Yeah. Okay. I could say something about that, but I would say that I would invest more in organizations than in candidates right now, knowing that out in the ecosystem, there's a lot of people that won't do the kind of due diligence of research that people on this lecture might think about, and they're just going to give money to the candidates. So they're going to get the money, right? They're going to get the money, the candidates. All right, Mort's coming for us. He says, how come the Senate likely stays Republican, and how come Dems lost seats in the House? I'm going to take those questions, okay?
Yeah, sure.
And then he says, also, Charles previously thought young minorities wanted more change than Biden would deliver and wouldn't show. So you're going to take that one, okay?
Got it.
Okay, so Mort also says, and I previously said this election would be all about Trump's failures on covert. I completely stick to that, Mort. I think the presidential election was about Trump's failures on COVID, but it only matters to certain states in this country. A lot of voters in other states, it didn't matter. But when you look at the turnout, I mean, Biden's going to win 73 million votes. He's going to win the popular vote by 5%. The reality is that Trump, as an incumbent, is about to lose. And I think he's losing on the strength of COVID. The reason it did not transfer to down ballot races in the same way that we might have thought is because I believe that COVID hostility, that anger from some Americans towards Trump was dedicated to Trump. It wasn't dedicated to Senate members or to Democrats. Sure, you could do an intellectual argument and apply it to them. They haven't passed legislation. They haven't been proactive. They haven't called Trump on the carpet, all of that. But in reality, in 2018, Trump wasn't on the ballot. So all the anti-Trump anger only had one place to go, towards the Republicans who were on the ballot. This time, the anti-Trump anger was from people who had it, were able to go to Trump. And he's losing. He's going to lose. But the senators and the Congress members, the House members, were able to get through, I believe, because the reality is that the anger around COVID did not come towards them. It got located on Trump. And of course it did. Of course it did, because of his lies and his getting COVID and all of that.
So the second part of this is, I'm trying to remember when this was, but I did say something about Biden not being able to capture the youth vote in the same way that Bernie Sanders or nearly any other candidate would be able to. And this is one where David and I had this conversation about who Biden was at his core and how astute of a politician he was. This is somebody who's been, he's done this for decades. And what he did really well was a progressive pivot. There was right after he was nominated, there was a group of progressives, young progressive organizations, Next Gen America, Justice Democrats, a few others that reached out to him directly, March for Our Lives, and said, here is our progressive agenda. You need to adopt some of this, as well as AOC. And he listened. He listened. If you go back and look at him during the presidential primary, and you look at him this summer, he moved on his policies. He did. And young voters, progressive voters, saw that, as did more progressive politicians, and they signed off on him. He totally got the sign off because he moved in their direction.
He did.
And you gotta do that. It unified the party. That was one of the biggest moments of this summer. Was the one thing that I don't want to go backwards in time, but previous politicians did not move far enough to the progressive wing to bring them on board.
No, Biden ran a reverse campaign. He ran a centrist campaign to win the primary and then moved left, not far left, but modestly left. All right, some quicker answers here by me. Deirdre says, should we focus on turning state legislatures blue in order to implement improvements to voting rules? The answer to that is yes, but it's not in lieu of other stuff. We also need a federal strategy. And if the Dems can get the Senate, then we can pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act with HR 1 as the template for it. So we need to operate two structures. If we get the Senate, then we can work at the federal level. Even if we do get the Senate, we need the states as well. So yeah, we'll be in Virginia in a big way again in 2021. We're going to be in Arizona and Colorado and Nevada, North Carolina and Georgia. This is where this country's going. Okay. Let's see.
I got one. Somebody asked me what I think of Colin Kaepernick. I think I love everything he stands for, except for when he goes as far as to say that voting doesn't matter. That's where he and I break ranks. I think that I love the guy and what he's done. I think that he sacrificed a lot and didn't get a lot for it in the beginning. And he's a hero, and he's completely wrong if he ever tells anybody not to vote or that voting is the solution. There are many other solutions that come after voting. Voting is the bare minimum that anybody needs to do to affect change in this country.
Yeah, there's great stuff here in the Q&A. Several of you have asked about my claim that political norms aren't coming back, the pre-Trump. Like folks are saying, what about this? Or really, do you think that? And so let me just kind of expand upon that a little bit. I think that Biden will restore a sense of dignity to the White House. And Kamala Harris, God, I love her. And she's going to be so great as the vice president and maybe someday as president. All right. Because she has a next generation identity and also a certain kind of next generation charisma that Joe Biden lacks. It's just not his thing. It's not his thing. I think Biden and Harris will restore dignity and trust and confidence with allies, with people will believe them and so on. But I believe that for people who are under the age of 40 years old, we will never have among them this notion that we should expect certain quality of behaviors out of the president in the same way that someone over 50 just has that as an expectation, right? Like when Bill Clinton did what he did, it shocked people in this country. We now have a president 3 times married, has paid off a porn star, yada, 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 all these things. And it clearly doesn't matter in the same way. And just like when you introduce swearing words onto television and so on, they just become normalized in our culture. This isn't necessarily terrible, folks. This isn't by definition terrible. It's a change though. It's a change. And so an AOC is showing us how you can be done, okay, in this environment. So let's just recognize that there are folks who will do very well in this space, and that it's a different space than what, again, baby boomers have been used to in this society. Yeah.
I would say folks that are my generation would say it feels a lot more honest. No one's pretending to be something they're not anymore. And this is who we thought a lot of the folks on the right were. And it's all out and open now. And it's a lot easier to deal with this.
Yeah. Thomas says, what will become of Trump's legal challenges? He owns the Supreme Court. He does. He does. Here's the thing though, Thomas. One, when you look at that electoral college map, Trump is losing all over the electoral college map right now. He's not just barely going to lose in Wisconsin. He's going to barely lose in Wisconsin, but he's losing by 150,000 votes in Michigan. He's going to lose by 75,000 in Pennsylvania. He's going to lose by 20,000 in Arizona. He's going to lose by 40,000 in Nevada. You can't overturn that. The Supreme Court cannot go that far. They can't. All right. Second, Trump has made very clear that he owns the Supreme Court. And because of that, the Supreme Court folks, because they need to assert their independence, and John Roberts is very sensitive to this, will do all they can to not be seen as bowing to him, even though, yes, they have. But the reality is that Roberts will work very hard to not allow that to happen. Jody says, are there cabinet choices and other leadership options that Biden can choose that will help unify the country? I don't think that there's anything in the cabinet that's going to unify the left and the right. In the cabinet, you could possibly unify the left and the left. Okay. You could put an Elizabeth Warren in the cabinet, and that would matter tremendously. You could put a Bernie Sanders, he wants to be labor secretary, in there, and that would matter tremendously. I do think that any choices involving elected officials will be taken up very carefully because you don't want to lose seats. Okay. I think you could unify the center left and the farther left, but unifying the rest of the country, I think we're beyond that division wise. What's going to unify this country is going to be generational change, in my view. It's going to be generational change. And that has often been the case in this country, that the most powerful change is not within a generation across ideological lines, but actually new people coming along and saying, I'm done with that. I'm just done with that. And so baby boomers, I believe the bed has been made. All right. And it's really incumbent on a little bit of Gen Xers and more millennials now to say, we're done with that. And we're going to create a third party, something like that. Yeah. Now, will Biden go so far as to nominate a Republican to his cabinet? He will. That's who Joe Biden is. And it could be a Tom Ridge kind of person, the former governor of Pennsylvania. And I'm good with that. I'm good with that, as long as they're on board with a just and inclusive democracy.
Linda's asking, how can CP help bridge a gap between urban and rural populations? I'm going to say that I think that the future of our operations, either in person or digital canvassing, talking to voters, will invest more in, and AOC talked about this today, I think, in a kind of a really long tweet thread where she defended progressive perspectives. There needs to be more what's called deep canvassing. Right now, most of the calls that volunteers make are really just kind of one and done calls where people ask if you know what to do, or say, please vote for this person, and then get out the vote. That there needs to be more of higher touch, more frequent calling by the same individuals, actually, that build the relationship with a cohort of voters, get to know them, and then slowly move them along the spectrum, along the continuum. That's something that is pioneered by unions. That's something that's like real organizing. That's where the term organizing is best utilized in the union space. And they've mastered this. And in the electoral space, campaigns have begun to implement this in the first half of the year, where there's more time to do that kind of thing. And we'll be doing more of that in the years to come.
Yeah. Susan, we'll do maybe 3 or 4 more questions, okay? Susan says, why were the polls so optimistic with regards to Senate candidates, with regards to Dem Senate candidates? The margins narrowed at the end, but candidates like Gideon and Cunningham were still leading. Teresa Greenfield was leading as well in Iowa, not in all the polls, but in a chunk of them. What happened? How come they didn't come through? Well, I think the discussion around the polls is going to take a while to figure it out, to figure out some of the things that are going on. It's clear that conservatives are less likely to answer the phone and do polling because they believe it's a flawed system, just like all other kind of establishment institutions. So it's just so hard to get a read on where conservatives are at when it comes to vote choices through polling. Okay, it's just challenging. And at the same time, I think that the lack of robust on the ground get out the vote campaigns that were just not present on the left did not hurt Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is 99% known by the American public. But it does hurt a candidate like Cal Cunningham, who needs to have people at the doors in the last month when they're dealing with the scandal. He needs people at the doors who are fighting for him, because those people at the doors move people. People at the doors like Sarah Gideon pointing out that what Susan Collins is doing is not acceptable in affirming this Supreme Court justice, or even allowing it to go forward. Now, in some of these races, there were still people doing door-to-door work, but it was nowhere near what it would have been normally. So I think that lack of a ground game, which was decreed really by the Biden campaign, did not hurt Biden and Harris, but I think it hurt down ballot candidates. And that's informing our thinking about Georgia, about how do we build a protocol health-wise that allows us to go? And it can be done. Maybe it can be done. And we're looking at it. Let's see. There's questions about the electors. Will electors not follow the votes of their states? Well, that's actually something I'm looking into right now, is how the electors are chosen in each state. And it's part of an advocacy initiative. It's going to be kind of like a step 2 of some advocacy work we're doing right now, which is to push elected officials to make sure they do the right thing around this election. Part of that will be in short order here to push governors, senators, and secretaries of state to make sure that electors are faithful electors, that they follow the will of the people. That said, the Supreme Court in June ruled that electors that states can put into place laws that force electors to follow the popular will of the state. So there are 20 things I could worry about right now in this election. That is not going to be one of them right now. All right, let's see.
I just got to say this.
Oh.
Somebody asked us if we've connected with Russell Wilson. We have not, but we would love to. If anyone listening to this has a connection to Russell Wilson and you think he'd be interested in the work that we're doing, give us a ring.
Hannah asked me, can I comment on Native American attitudes and votes? I'm so glad, Hannah, you asked that question, because I meant to in my presentation. When you look across the country, Native numbers are not large numbers, all right? But in Montana, in Arizona, in Nevada, they were strongly blue. And in the 3 counties that make up the largest kind of nation in the United States, indigenous nation, the Navajo Nation, when you look at the 3 counties in Arizona that overlap the land that is Navajo Nation, those 3 counties went 97-3 among the Navajo voters for percentage-wise for Biden and Harris in Arizona. 97% to 3% for Biden and Harris. It is enough in those numbers because of that vote distribution to more than carry Arizona right now for Joe Biden. And my God, in the midst of the pandemic that has been devastating to these communities, that is the kind of courage and patriotism that, frankly, white people like me don't deserve to see from these folks that have been treated so horribly, but I'm inspired by, and it calls me to more action every day.
Amen.
All right, let's see. Let's both pick one more question out of here.
Well, I just want to tell people. So one question here is: Are these lectures going to continue now that the election is over? 1,000,000% yes. Okay. Look, if we abolished voting and elections, period, okay, David would still give lectures. I just need you all to understand this. There will be lectures coming for sure. Do not worry. And on a more serious note, education is a really big part of how we bring people into this work. When they understand more about the history of voting in America, about what they can do to affect change, at lectures like this, that's when they come and they do work with us. So it's a must. It has to continue, and he loves it.
Yeah, I think when we started Common Power, I did not have this sense that education would be so important to what we do. And it's certainly in my professional DNA. So I'm thrilled that we've gotten here. But I think I'm more excited about us as an organization because I feel like we've gotten here organically too, as an organization. That AJ's work, Larcy's creation of Action Academy, Maria Bando and the book club and trivia and all that, right? So this interweaving of education and the actual work and community, right, is those are our pillars. They're core to who we are. So will these lectures happen as many as I did this year? I've done a lot in the last many months. No, probably not. But I do already have in mind the doing a lecture series in early 2021 about kind of how we move forward around voting rights and voting reform. And, you know, that's long enough. Like 2 months without a lecture series, that's probably the limit of what I could do. Let me ask this question to finish up, Charles, because this has been getting some discussion out there. To what extent, not out there in this chat, although it's probably here a couple places in chat, but I mean in the Twitter world, to what extent do you think concern about violent protests and defund the police rhetoric might have influenced voters and resulted in closer than projected results?
I'm gonna point you to AOC's thread where she addressed just this. So she was on a call with her peers. I don't know. Do you know about this, David? She was on a call with her peers, and
it was a Democratic caucus. It was a Democratic Party caucus,
and they basically accused her of. I mean, they accused her wing of our side for some of the defeats. I will tell you that it is my perspective that the youth turnout would not be where it is right now were it not for those protests. That is, I cannot stress this enough. It was the protests that woke up a lot of people, and then it was the people on megaphones, and I was there. My kids were there. In fact, I dropped my kids off at a protest this year, which was a really proud moment before I even went. Okay. And I know your son actually too said, I'm going to this protest.
Yeah.
And it is kind of like a lecture in terms of how it catalyzes young people. Again, after that, there were people on megaphones that were saying, you want to do something about this vote. There were people registering people at these protests to vote. There's a clear through line from like anger and frustration to voting for change. There are local elections where there are wins that would not have happened were it not for these protests and the youth turnout. So did some people suffer from the labeling of socialism, and did it hurt in some conservative areas? Yeah. But I don't think we get Arizona without it. I don't think we get Georgia without it.
I think that I agree exactly with what Charles said. I think that the power of this labeling was greatest in Florida. Okay. And that's a historic artifact in Florida, given the life histories of the populations that come there. You have large folks coming south who are white it's a Florida, and you've got large influxes of Latinx, very diverse bodies of groups within that big bucket who have come north into Florida. And so socialism as a frame, and perhaps a bit of a backlash against the protests generally among more conservative-minded Latino people, I think is part of the story in Florida, and it needs to be thought through and analyzed. And I have finally decided that Florida is a red state. Okay, it is not a purple state. It is a red state. It is a red state more and more because of the voting laws in the state. All right. So maybe by population, it's a purple state, but by voting population, it's a red state. So let's look at other places in this country where it's apparent that Biden has made inroads, or the Democrats turned out the vote massively. In the Georgia, in North Carolina, in Texas, and in Arizona. To me, those protests, that sense of justice, fighting for justice, enormous. Across the North, where you might say the white backlash would be strongest to defunding the police idea, no, actually, these are the states the Dems won back across the North. Okay.
That's right.
So I'm not going to say that these things aren't complicated, that there is some things to think through, but I don't think that the AOC wing or the previous Nancy Pelosi wing or the defund the police rhetoric of protesters drove this election. I think it was Biden and Trump at the top and largely partisan preferences down the line after that. Okay, it was just largely partisan preferences down the line after that. And the Dems are losing some seats that they won in 2018 in Trump districts, but it was going to be tough to hold them. All right, it was going to be tough to hold them. And when you revert to partisan positions, the Dems are losing some of those seats. Now, going forward, do the Dems need to build a rhetoric that is separate, not just a rhetoric, but a policy positions and messaging that is not about the protest per se, put that over in a box that actually appeals to new immigrants in this country, Latino people in this country? Yeah, the Dems have some significant work to do there. Absolutely, they do. And we're on board for working with those communities, but we can't solve that policy problem for them. That's one that they need to work through. And as Charles well knows, because I've heard him say this, we are working with some people in Arizona that got a lot of the answers here. You want to find out the answers are? That's where they are.
That's right.
So, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. You're going to hear a lot more from me in months to come. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we'll do something else like this again. All right. But let's recognize that winning the White House is not a small thing. It is not everything that people wanted this election, nor I, but it is a big deal. It will change the climate change work in this country and our ability to do work on this. It will impact healthcare dramatically. It will shape the judges that get appointed because the president nominates the federal judges, all right? It will impact education in this country. We're about to have the first female vice president, a Black woman, a Southeast Asian woman, all right? So let's recognize the wins and celebrate them and then come back tomorrow and fight harder again.
There you go. Back to work.
Let's go. All right. Thanks, Charles. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Have a good night.